As you know, too, the Department of Homeland Security took over basically the perimeter of the United States. And they started with 50 miles. Now they're into 100 miles around the coastline, right inland, etc., and from the Canadian border southwards. And they want to do the same thing. A few years ago in the paper, they wanted the whole of the Americas to have this organization. They called it Fortress America. And that's when the Prime Minister of Canada and the U.S. President and one of Mexico met together, and a few Latin American countries, and they drew up a map, and they wanted to actually bring in Fortress America with a homeland security all along the Canadian border. That's a coastline, a whole lot, right down through Latin America and back up again. So they're using every crisis for complete amalgamation. And, by the way, the Council on Foreign Relations has said in Canada, we are using this financial crisis for deeper integration. That means merging with the United States of America. That's been in the open here. So, yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. And getting back into the Occupy Wall Street formation of that global revolution, what do you see happening? Because obviously there's a lot of grassroots energy, people upset about general economic conditions, but not a lot of specifics. And it's really pretty textbook that if you don't have an energy that's inside of what's already been established inside the left-right paradigm, you can either A, disrupt it, or more easily you can vent that anger, give them a certain pleasure that they're being spoken to and heard while co-opting it, Alan. So what direction do you see this going?
Well, we're already told where they're going, because in one of the first World Trade Organization meetings they had and publicized, they showed you a little interview inside the meeting. They were looking down at the protests, as they always do from the ivory towers, and they said we'll have to eventually, over the years, bring the leaders in on board with our panel discussions and make them part of it. Well, they've been doing that for years now, since then. And we know, for instance, we've watched the appointees of Obama's specialists on his panels, unelected people who are now experts, these science czars, etc., who are all really into sociology and family planning and depopulation. Well, every country is doing the same. Britain has its version of them too. So does Canada with their appointees now. There's many appointees almost at the top as elected people. And these are representatives of unions and everything else. And if you notice even that some of the organizations in the Occupy Wall Street you find is backed by the AFSCME, the FL-CIO, the Labour Union, and people, and these organizations. And the President, Gerald McIntyre, is a co-founder and chairman of the Board for Economic Policy Institute. He's one of the leaders now at Wall Street there. And he also helped pass the Obamacare. So they're already on board, these panels, in the U.S. government, and also members of these unions down below. They're both, you see. And there's quite a few of them like that. There's also Robert Johnson, who serves as the managing director of Soros Fund Management. He also worked as the chief economist for the Senate Banking and Budget Committee. He's down there too, leading the thing against Wall Street, the charge against Wall Street. So they already have these guys on board with government and all these organizations, and they're also part of these supposedly left-wing socialist organizations for world governance, they call it. Lawrence Mitchell as well. He was the Economic Policy Institute's president, a long-time member of Democratic Socialists of America, and he's also in it too. So all these big boys are in on the Wall Street thing, while they also work with these big foundations that work with the Obama and government as well. So it's government leading what appears to be a revolt of the people.
We've seen a big hype for war with Iran, with this phony assassination plot taking place last week, really paper thin, despite what the headlines would lead you to believe. Now there's other incidents. There was a guy on a plane that landed in Texas who was screaming in Arabic, and then how everyone was going to die. Now you've got these Muslims busted at a Texas courthouse who I believe they had blueprints, and there was a bomb scare or something. Are they preparing for something, Alan?
Oh, yeah. I mean, from the 90s, they've been preparing for it, in fact, because we know that the New American Century group published a list of countries they had to take out, and they wanted to start with Afghanistan, Iraq, and then it would be a toss-up between Syria or Iran to follow. They mentioned Egypt as well, and then eventually North Korea. But the main ones were in the Middle East. So and we see that Rumsfeld and Cheney have both congratulated Obama for continuing their policy of taking over those countries. Now, the New American Century Group under Bush called it revolutionary democracy. In other words, you would invade and force democracy upon them. And now we're seeing this group here using the color revolutions followed by hard power, military power, which is exactly, again, what the think tank for the military said they'd do. And they published their findings. I've got them all up on my website, so all their different think tank reports. So they're following the agenda they said that they'd follow back in the 90s. And Jefferson said it, when you say the same policies follow from changes in house between one to the next house, then you know you're under tyranny. You're not under a different government, a different party. It's the same organization running the same policies. And that's what you're seeing.
Yeah, certainly, if you want to call it a black ops network or whatever. And now you even have reports like Paul Watson's from today on the State Department agitator who was part of the Egypt Arab Spring, backed by the State Department. Now he's advising the Occupy Wall Street movement, Alan.
Yeah, it's like the ones that just read off, too. These guys are all members and working with the government, and they also run some of the largest socialist organizations of America. I don't know if Americans realize that the Socialist International, how big and powerful they are, and that the British Labour government kicks off its annual meeting, and they finish their annual meeting, and they sing the red flag. Did they know that? Tony Blair, I've got videos about Tony Blair and all the big boys who were in charge of Britain, and they were singing, "We'll keep the red flag flying high." They don't understand that Sarkozy, all the people across the world, right through into the United Nations, are members of this organization, including the ones in America.
Yeah, not to mention all
they sing at their annual meetings. And the press generally doesn't bother reporting that part, but in Britain, some people have. And they've filmed it and documented it.
Yeah, as a side note, I've seen a lot of these trendy bars popping up here in town in Austin with the communist hammer and sickle on the logo. But just goes to show.
Mm-hmm. So the dialectic, remember, Hegel pointed out the dialectic and how you always use opposing sides to bring out the new. And what you also do under the Marxist program, basically, is that each generation of Marxists must be more radical than the previous one. And in fact, they've got the right to eliminate, physically if need be, the older ones who are still contaminated with the old ideas. And today we're seeing the younger ones who have the fresh group, the fresh crop, they're freshly trained in university, because that's where all the leaders come from. They're all trained by professional professors to agitate for the new system, a better, a more fairer world of justice, etc. But of course, with world managers like themselves living high on the hog, because as I said, you have to have an intelligentsia class and a leisure class to help plan the future. So, this is really the Marxist agenda, and that's why the Marxism was founded basically in London. Marx was funded by one of the biggest factory owners in the whole of Europe. He wasn't a poor little guy, he had his own personal servant and all the rest of it. And they've used this dialectic for since then, because the bankers prefer socialist governments, because, as I say, there's a layer of government for every facet of humanity. It's total control over humanity is what it is.
Yeah, and maybe on the other side of the break here in the last segment, we could talk about how Al Gore, who is part of the Arm and Hammer empire, who backed the Soviet Union, called for this American version of the Arab Spring about 3 weeks before it popped up, Alan.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. Or your comments now as we go out to break here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Arm and Hammer, again, his father changed his name to be the Arm and Hammer that you see on the British Communist site and the British Freemason site, by the way. They use the Arm and Hammer instead of Compton Square. And that's why he changed his name to actually be a Soviet, the epitome of the Sovietism, basically. Multi-millionaire. And he had an apartment next to Lenin and then Stalin. And he could come back and forth during the Cold War, Arm and Hammer. No one stopped him, bothered him, or asked him what he was up to. and helped organize the far left in America. The big boys all knew what they were doing. The big bankers all knew what it was up about because it's part of the agenda. They must merge the two systems together to bring out the synthesis, the next part of the new
Final
world
segment
order.
with Alan Watt coming up on the other side of this break. Then tonight, the InfoWars Nightly News. Stay tuned, Infowars.com.